Welcome back, guys. Hope you're all doing well today because there's a lot happening and a lot of noise out there. And this is one of those moments where it's really important to separate signal from distraction. We've got fresh updates on the Clarity Act, new developments coming out of Washington, macro pressure building globally with Japan, Venezuela, and oil. And a lot of people are asking the same question in different ways. Do we need to wait for regulation for XRP to move, or is something else already happening behind the scenes? Before we get into the details, if you follow Ripple and XRP, type an X in the comments, hit that like button, and let's get into this because there's a misconception spreading right now that needs to be cleared up early in this video. Let's start with the Clarity Act because this is what everyone is watching. Eleanor Terrett confirmed this morning through a Senate Banking Committee spokesperson that the U.S. Senate Banking Committee will not be holding a market structure markup this year. Instead, they're targeting 2026. The key takeaway here isn't delay, it's intent. Chairman Scott and the committee are still negotiating a bipartisan digital asset market structure bill, and they've been very clear about their goal: provide clarity for the industry and position the United States as the global crypto capital. Now, here's where people get this wrong. A lot of investors are telling themselves nothing is going to happen until the Clarity Act passes. That's an easy story to believe, but it's not supported by history. XRP has never required perfect regulatory clarity to move. Some of the largest XRP runs happened when sentiment was terrible, when regulation was unclear, and when most people weren't paying attention. In fact, last year when XRP made a strong move, there was no Clarity Act in place, no finalized market structure bill, and very few people saw it coming. So if you're waiting for fireworks the moment a bill is signed, you're already late to how these markets actually work. Regulation doesn't create adoption, it accelerates what's already happening. And what we're watching right now is not the start of adoption, but the expansion phase of infrastructure that's been building quietly for years. The Clarity Act will absolutely help the entire industry. It will remove friction, unlock capital, and bring more institutions into the open. But XRP does not sit idle waiting for permission to exist. This is an important mindset shift. Markets don't move when regulation becomes perfect. They move when positioning is already complete and the narrative catches up. By the time retail feels safe, institutions have already acted. That's why so many people feel like moves come out of nowhere, because they're watching headlines instead of systems. And this is where XRP continues to confuse people who only look at charts. XRP isn't trying to win a popularity contest. It's not competing for attention. It's positioned inside the financial system itself, and that means progress shows up as access, integration, and utility, not as daily green candles. So when you hear 2026 tied to the Clarity Act, don't hear delay, hear confirmation, hear coordination, hear that the industry is being formalized while infrastructure continues to move forward in real time. The market doesn't stop just because legislation hasn't crossed the finish line yet, and that's why this video matters, because while a lot of people are staring at one bill, there are other forces already in motion: geopolitics, liquidity shifts, banking integration, and yield mechanisms that will matter just as much, if not more, for XRP holders over the next phase. Now let's zoom out and talk about the geopolitical headline that's making a lot of people nervous right now, because this is where fear spreads fast and facts usually get ignored. President Trump ordered a complete blockade of all sanctioned oil tankers moving in and out of Venezuela, and immediately you started seeing speculation everywhere about oil spikes, inflation surging again, markets collapsing, and crypto getting crushed. That reaction is emotional. The reality is more measured. When you actually look at the numbers, Venezuela exports roughly 900,000 barrels of oil per day, and this blockade threatens about 300,000 barrels per day. On a global scale, that represents roughly 0.3% of total oil supply. That is not insignificant, but it is also not enough on its own to trigger a massive oil shock the way some people are framing it. So if you're waiting for oil to explode overnight because of this announcement, the data simply doesn't support that conclusion right now. What does matter, though, is context. This isn't just about oil. It's about leverage, pressure, and control. Venezuela has been selling oil to countries the U.S. isn't exactly aligned with, and Trump has made it very clear he wants to reassert U.S. dominance over global energy markets. This move is about tightening the screws, not blowing up the system immediately, and this is where crypto investors need to be careful. During moments like this, markets often price in fear first and then correct once reality sets in. We've seen this pattern over and over again. Headlines create panic, risk assets pull back, volatility spikes, and then capital slowly repositions once people realize the world didn't end. Historically, XRP and the broader crypto market tend to dip at the start of geopolitical escalations, not because the asset itself is broken, but because investors temporarily move into risk-off mode. And if you go back and look at past conflicts, Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Palestine, the biggest long-term gains came from people who bought during uncertainty, not those who sold into it. That doesn't mean ignore risk. It means understand where fear is justified and where it's exaggerated. Right now, this Venezuela situation is something to monitor, not something to panic over. Oil prices matter for inflation. Inflation matters for interest rates. And interest rates matter for liquidity. That's the chain you should be watching, not just one headline in isolation. And here's the key transition point. While geopolitical noise grabs attention, something far more important is happening quietly inside the financial system itself. Regulation is moving, banks are moving, and stablecoin infrastructure is accelerating faster than most people realize. Now, this is where things start getting real, because while most people are distracted by headlines and short-term price moves, the plumbing of the financial system is quietly being upgraded. And this update from the FDIC is one of the clearest signals we've seen so far. A new framework has been launched that allows banks to issue payment stablecoins through subsidiaries with a 30-day completeness review and a 120-day approval timeline. That might sound boring at first glance, but make no mistake, this is a major green light for traditional banks to move directly into the digital asset space in a regulated, compliant way. This is not theoretical anymore. This is not pilot programs or test balloons. This is a formal pathway. What this means in simple terms is that banks are no longer standing on the sidelines wondering if they can participate. They're being told how to participate, and once that door is open, it doesn't close again. Now, tie this back to what we've already seen recently. Ripple received the official green light from the OCC. The FDIC is outlining stablecoin issuance. Lawmakers are negotiating market structure. These are not isolated events. They are coordinated steps toward integrating blockchain technology into the existing financial system, not replacing it, but upgrading it. And this is exactly where XRP fits. Stablecoins don't function in a vacuum. They need settlement. They need liquidity. They need a bridge between currencies, jurisdictions, and balance sheets. Issuing a stablecoin is only half the equation. Moving value efficiently at scale across borders and systems is the hard part. And that's the problem XRP was designed to solve. So when people ask, why isn't XRP pumping yet? They're missing what's actually happening. Institutions don't buy infrastructure assets after the system is finished. They position during the build-out phase, when everything is quiet and misunderstood. This is also why progress feels slow to retail investors. Banks don't announce every integration. Custodians don't live stream their back-end upgrades. Liquidity rails don't trend on social media. But these are the things that determine where capital flows over the next decade. And here's the most important part. Once regulated institutions are allowed to issue stablecoins, they immediately care about counterparty risk, settlement speed, and liquidity efficiency. Those are not optional concerns. Those are existential concerns at scale. XRP doesn't compete with hype narratives. It competes by reducing friction where it actually matters. And that's why what you're seeing right now isn't chaos. It's sequencing. Regulation, banking access, custody, liquidity, yield. Each piece clicks into place one at a time. Price reacts last. Now let's talk about something XRP holders have been waiting years to hear, because this is where the conversation shifts from just holding to actually earning. A few hours ago, news broke that Doppler Finance is partnering with SBI Ripple Asia to explore XRP-based yield infrastructure and real-world asset tokenization directly on the XRP ledger. And this matters far more than most people realize at first glance. For a long time, XRP holders were told the same thing. Just hold, wait for price, wait for adoption, wait for regulation. And while that thesis still matters, the market is now entering a phase where ownership itself becomes productive. Yield changes everything. When you can earn on an asset without selling it, your incentive structure shifts completely. This isn't DeFi gimmicks. This is regulated, institution-adjacent infrastructure being built with long-standing Ripple partners. SBI isn't some random name in crypto. They've been aligned with Ripple for years, and they don't move without intent. Yield infrastructure tied to XRP means liquidity is no longer just something institutions consume, it's something holders can provide. And this fits perfectly with what we're seeing elsewhere. There's growing discussion that platforms like I Trust Capital are exploring XRP yield strategies heading into 2026. That's important because it brings institutional grade custody, compliance, and tax advantage structures into the equation. Whether that's through IRAs or premium custody accounts, this is about making XRP usable for long-term capital strategies, not just trading accounts. Here's the bigger point. Once yield enters the picture, XRP stops behaving like a speculative token and starts behaving like financial infrastructure you can participate in. You don't need to sell your XRP to benefit from it. You don't need to time tops or bottoms. You can simply hold, provide liquidity, and let the system work around you. That's a massive psychological shift for the market. It also explains why institutions are patient. Yield systems don't get rushed. They get tested, regulated, and integrated carefully. But once they're live, they tend to stick. And when holders realize they can earn while holding an appreciating asset tied to global settlement, behavior changes, selling pressure drops, long-term conviction strengthens, and this is where a lot of people are still stuck in the old mindset, thinking every asset only makes sense if it's going straight up. Real wealth systems don't work that way. They compound quietly before they're obvious. Now let's close this out properly, because this is where a lot of people either lock in conviction or lose it entirely. The final piece of this puzzle right now is Japan, and more specifically, the Bank of Japan preparing to raise interest rates to their highest level since 1995. That matters, not just for Japan, but for global liquidity, risk assets, and yes, XRP. When the Bank of Japan tightens, markets feel it. Volatility increases, risk assets get shaky, short-term traders panic. And if you're staring at charts every single day, this is the kind of environment that will absolutely exhaust you mentally. That's why I want to be very clear about something. This was never a straight line story. XRP has never moved in a straight line. It never will. What we are watching being built right now cannot be fully understood through short-term technical analysis alone. Charts matter, but they are not the full picture. This market will move up, then down, then sideways, then violently in both directions. And if you let every candle dictate your emotions, you'll end up making decisions you regret. Narratives will shift, headlines will change, fear will rotate from one macro event to the next, but underneath all of that noise, the long-term drivers remain the same: utility, liquidity, and real-world adoption. And this is where XRP stands apart. XRP is not optional infrastructure. It sits at the intersection of global finance, where liquidity must move efficiently whether markets are calm or chaotic. When systems scale, they don't choose assets based on hype. They choose assets based on reliability, speed, and efficiency. That's where XRP continues to position itself. Price will not ultimately be driven by speculation. It won't be driven by influencers. It won't be driven by short-term traders trying to front-run the next headline. XRP will move when liquidity demands it, and liquidity doesn't ask for permission. So the real challenge for holders isn't predicting the next move. It's staying grounded while the system matures. It's understanding what you own, why it exists, and what problem it was designed to solve. Once you've done that work, the daily noise loses its power over you. When we look back on this period in hindsight, the moves won't be surprising. They'll feel obvious. The adoption we're seeing right now is happening in real time, quietly, methodically, and without fanfare. And that's exactly how real financial infrastructure gets built. The best part of this journey is still ahead. XRP has already created life-changing outcomes in the past, and there is nothing about the current trajectory that suggests that chapter is closed. If anything, the foundation is stronger than it's ever been. That's all I've got for you today. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I always read them. Thank you for your time, your support, and your patience. God bless, and I'll see you in the next one.